From the dawn of consciousness, we have stared into the night. We have seen in its infinite blackness a canvas for our gods, a map for our navigators, and a void for our deepest fears. It is the final, silent frontier, a universe of profound and unanswered questions. With each new generation, our eyes grow sharper, our reach extends further, and the darkness recedes just a little. We built monuments of stone to chart the seasons. We crafted lenses of glass to resolve the planets. And now we have forged a new eye from gold and beryllium, an eye so powerful it can gaze back to the dawn of time itself. The James Webb Space Telescope. It does not orbit the Earth. It resides 1 million miles away in the cold, stable dark, a silent sentinel shielded from the glare of our own sun. Its purpose is to see the unseen, to capture the faint ancient light from the universe's first stars and galaxies. But in its quest to look out to the farthest reaches of creation, it has also turned its gaze inward, into the dusty, crowded heart of our own cosmic home, the Milky Way. And in a patch of sky once thought unremarkable, a region catalogued simply as astrometric target 25 Papar 69, it has found something that challenges not only what we know, but who we think we are. It has looked too deep into the stellar fog, and what it has found is profoundly disturbing. To comprehend the magnitude of this revelation, we must first understand the instrument that made it possible. The James Webb Space Telescope is not merely a successor to Hubble. It represents a fundamental leap in observational power, a different way of perceiving the cosmos altogether. For decades, its conception was the dream of astronomers, a fantastically ambitious project that teetered on the brink of cancellation numerous times. It demanded new technologies, new materials, and a level of engineering precision never before attempted by humankind. Its primary mirror, a breathtaking honeycomb of 18 hexagonal segments, spans over 6.5 meters. Each segment is coated in a microscopically thin layer of pure gold, a material chosen for its supreme ability to reflect infrared light. This is the key, the secret to Webb's extraordinary vision. The universe is expanding, and as light travels across billions of years to reach us from the earliest epochs, its wavelength is stretched, shifted from visible light into the infrared spectrum. Cosmic dust, the very stuff from which stars and planets are born, is opaque to visible light, shrouding vast regions of our galaxy in impenetrable darkness. But for the infrared gaze of the JWST, this dust is as transparent as glass. It is like possessing a form of cosmic X-ray vision, allowing us to peer into the dense, chaotic nurseries where stars ignite and solar systems coalesce. Imagine standing outside a brightly lit ballroom in a dense fog. With your own eyes, you can only see the swirling mist. Hubble could make out the faint, blurry glows of the chandeliers within, but Webb, it sees the individual dancers, the expressions on their faces, the intricate patterns of their waltz. It sees everything. The telescope's journey to its operational location was an epic in itself. Folded like a complex piece of technological origami to fit inside a rocket fairing, it embarked on a month-long, million-mile voyage to the second Lagrange point. This is a special place in space, a gravitationally stable island where the pull of the Sun and Earth balance perfectly, allowing the telescope to remain stationary relative to us with minimal fuel. Once there, it began the most delicate and nerve-wracking deployment sequence ever executed. Hundreds of motors, pulleys, and release mechanisms had to work flawlessly. A 5-layer sunshield, each sheet as thin as a human hair but the size of a tennis court, unfurled to protect the sensitive instruments from the sun's heat, cooling them to a staggering negative 230 degrees Celsius. Only in this profound cold could the telescope's own heat signature be suppressed enough to detect the faint warmth of the universe's oldest light. Then, the mirrors unfolded and aligned, focusing with a precision measured in nanometers. It was an engineering miracle, and when the first images were released to the world, they were a watershed moment, revealing the cosmos with a clarity and depth that brought scientists to tears. Cosmic cliffs of glowing gas, galaxies caught in a gravitational dance, the atmospheric composition of distant exoplanets. Humanity had a new sense, and the universe would never look the same. The initial mission was to look outward, to the very edge of time. But a portion of its observation schedule was dedicated to our own galaxy. Understanding the Milky Way is understanding our own origins, the very processes that led to our sun, our planet, our existence. Astronomers targeted a region designated AT25P69. This was not a famous nebula or a known stellar cluster. It was a deliberately mundane target, an anonymous patch of sky in the Sagittarius arm, chosen precisely for its obscurity. It was believed to be a typical, dense molecular cloud, a cold, dark expanse of gas and dust, seemingly placid and uninteresting to previous telescopes. The scientific goal was simple: to use Webb's infrared sensitivity to pierce the dust veil and conduct a census of the young, forming stars hidden within. It was meant to be a routine calibration, a confirmation of star formation theories in a standard galactic environment. No one expected to find anything other than what the models predicted: the gentle glow of protostars, the clumping of gas into stellar cocoons, the familiar chaotic beauty of cosmic creation. The first raw data streamed down from the telescope, converted from photons into digital signals at a control center in Baltimore, Maryland. On computer screens, the darkness of AT25P69 began to resolve into an image of impossible detail. The scientists gathered, their anticipation palpable. The dust clouds, once opaque smudges, were now revealed as diaphanous, glowing structures, filaments of hydrogen and helium laced with heavier elements. The familiar signatures were there, the intense infrared points of light indicating nascent stars, their heat warming the surrounding material. The initial reaction was one of triumph. The telescope was working perfectly. But as the data processing software refined the image, and as the astronomers zoomed in, a sense of confusion began to ripple through the room. The quiet excitement gave way to a tense, puzzled silence. Something was not right. Deep within the nebula, woven into the very fabric of the gas and dust, were structures. This in itself was not unusual. Gravity and stellar winds sculpt gas clouds into pillars and arcs. But these were different. They were unnervingly regular. There were filaments, light years in length, that maintained a perfectly uniform thickness. They intersected one another not in the chaotic tangles expected from natural forces, but at precise, repeating 90-degree angles. It looked like a grid, a vast, translucent cosmic lattice superimposed upon the nebula. Elsewhere, the dust was not merely clumped, but appeared to be arranged in concentric circles, perfectly spaced, like ripples on a pond frozen in time. These rings spanned entire solar systems in diameter. The initial assumption was a data artifact, a glitch in the telescope's sensors or the image processing algorithm. Such perfect geometry is simply not a feature of astrophysics. The universe, for all its mathematical elegance, is messy at the local level. Gravity is clumpy. Explosions are asymmetrical. Nature does not draw with a ruler and a compass on a galactic scale. Frantic checks were run. The telescope was recalibrated. It was pointed at a different, well-understood nebula, and it produced a perfectly normal, chaotic image. Then it was pointed back at a T25P69. The structures were still there, unwavering, real. The team then turned to Webb's other primary instrument, the spectrometer. An image tells you what something looks like. A spectrum tells you what it is made of. By breaking down the light that passes through an object into its constituent wavelengths, scientists can identify the chemical elements and molecules present, like a cosmic fingerprint. They analysed the light from distant stars as it filtered through the strange grid-like filaments of AT25P69. The results that came back were the turning point, the moment when deep confusion morphed into a quiet, chilling dread. Natural molecular clouds are composed overwhelmingly of hydrogen and helium, with trace amounts of simple molecules like water, carbon monoxide, and ammonia. The spectrum from the filaments of AT25P69 was bizarre. It showed the presence of complex, heavy elements in arrangements that defied explanation. There were metallic signatures, not just of iron or silicon, but of rarer, heavier elements like gold and platinum, not dispersed randomly as they would be from a supernova explosion, but seemingly organised. Even more unnerving were the absorption lines in the spectrum. They appeared in complex, non-random patterns, almost like a barcode, a repeating sequence of information encoded into the very light passing through the structure. It was as if someone, or something, had deliberately arranged specific atoms and molecules along these light-year-long filaments to filter starlight in a particular structured way. It was not a message in the way we might send a radio signal. It was far more profound. It was a physical structure, built on an astronomical scale that possessed an inherent repeating complexity. It was an artifact. The implications were staggering, almost too vast to process. What they were observing was not a natural phenomenon. It was a piece of engineering, a construction of incomprehensible size and unimaginable age. The concentric rings, the right-angle grid, these were not accidental formations. They were the remnants of something that had been built. To get a sense of the scale, imagine discovering a perfectly machined, intricate microchip. Now imagine that microchip was the size of the entire North American continent. The discovery at ST25 P69 is orders of magnitude larger than that. If our solar system were a grain of sand, this structure would be a skyscraper. The material used to build it was not steel or carbon fibre, but the fundamental building blocks of the galaxy itself. Entire clouds of interstellar gas and dust, manipulated and arranged with a precision that our physics cannot begin to explain. Who could have built such a thing, and for what purpose? The question sent a shockwave through the small, secret circle of scientists who were analysing the data. The structure appeared ancient. It was cold, emitting no discernible heat of its own. It was utterly silent, broadcasting no energy, no radio waves, nothing. It seemed dormant, a ghost in the machine of the galaxy. By measuring the slow drift of the structure against the background stars, the team estimated it had to be at least several 100 million, perhaps even 1 billion years old. It predates the Earth itself. It has been sitting there, in the dark, less than 20,000 light-years from us. A silent testament to a power that rose and perhaps fell, long before our species even existed. This finding presents a terrifying and profound new answer to the Fermi paradox. The famous question posed by physicist Enrico Fermi: if the universe is teeming with life, where is everybody? We have spent decades scanning the skies with radio telescopes, listening for signals, for the telltale signs of intelligent communication. We have found nothing but a great cosmic silence. The discovery at a T25 P69 suggests the reason for this silence is that we have been looking for the wrong thing. We have been searching for civilizations at our own primitive level of technological development. We've been listening for whispers in a language we understand, like radio. We never conceived that an advanced intelligence might not communicate by broadcasting energy, but by building with the fabric of the cosmos itself. Perhaps the final stage of a civilization's evolution is not to shout into the void, but to become the void, to engineer on a scale so vast that its creations become indistinguishable from the background of the universe to all but the most powerful and precise eyes. It reframes the entire question of what we should be searching for. It suggests there might be a galactic archaeology waiting to be uncovered. That the universe is not an empty wilderness, but a place filled with ancient ruins, artifacts of such scale and subtlety that we have been blind to them until now. The pillars of creation, the Horsehead Nebula, are we certain these are all natural formations? Or are we merely a culture living amongst the overgrown ruins of a fallen empire, too primitive to recognise the architecture? This is the first, deeply disturbing implication, that we are not alone, but that we are catastrophically late to the party, that the grand drama of the galaxy might already be over, and we are just now waking up in the quiet aftermath. But there is a second, even more unsettling possibility. The structure at AT25 P69 is not necessarily a ruin. Its perfect geometry, its stable, cold state, could imply something else. Not death, but dormancy. What if it isn't a monument, but a machine? A machine that is currently switched off? What would be the purpose of such an incomprehensibly large device? A stellar-scale computer? A transport system? A weapon? The energy requirements to manipulate that much matter, to arrange entire nebulae with such precision, would be beyond anything a Type 3 civilization on the Kardashev scale could muster. It would require a level of energy output equivalent to a significant fraction of the entire Milky Way galaxy. This is not the work of a biological species as we know it. It suggests an intelligence that has transcended biology, perhaps even what we understand as physics. Let us explore a chilling analogy. Imagine an isolated tribe in a deep jungle that has never had contact with the outside world. For generations they have observed a massive, grey, unmoving mountain on the horizon. It is a part of their landscape, their cosmology. One day, a curious tribe member develops a new tool, a crystal that allows them to see the mountain with greater clarity. And they realise it's not a mountain. It is covered in perfectly repeating patterns. It is not made of rock, but of a strange, hardened material. It is a dormant, silent warship left over from a forgotten conflict. The tribe is not living in a pristine wilderness. They are living in the shadow of a weapon of unimaginable power, and their only comfort was their ignorance. We are that tribe. The James Webb Space Telescope is our crystal, and a T25 P69 is our mountain. We have just realised that a feature of our cosmic landscape is not natural, and we have absolutely no idea what it was built for, or if it might one day turn back on. This revelation has forced scientists to re-examine other cosmic anomalies that have long puzzled them. Tabby's star, with its bizarre unexplained dimming, was once speculated to be an alien megastructure. That theory was largely dismissed in favour of natural explanations like dust. Now, it must be looked at again. The Great Attractor, an unseen gravitational anomaly that is pulling our entire local group of galaxies towards it, remains a mystery. Oumuamua, the strange interstellar object that accelerated out of our solar system, defied easy classification. Are these isolated curiosities? Or are they puzzle pieces, hints of a galactic ecosystem of intelligences so advanced? Their actions and artifacts appear to us as mere gravitational or stellar anomalies. It's as if an ant, living its entire life on a single paving stone, were to try and comprehend the purpose of the entire city surrounding it. The vibrations of the subway, the shadows of skyscrapers, the roar of aircraft, all would be inexplicable, terrifying, godlike phenomena. The philosophical shockwaves are perhaps the most significant. For our entire history, we have defined ourselves by our uniqueness. Even as we accepted we were not the centre of the universe, we held on to the belief that our consciousness, our spark of intelligence, was a rare and precious thing. The discovery at AT25 P69 demolishes this. It suggests that not only is intelligence not unique, but that forms of it may have existed that make our own achievements seem like the scribblings of a child. It recontextualizes human existence as a fleeting, perhaps insignificant biological event in a galaxy that has hosted minds of unimaginable capacity. It is a profoundly humbling, and for many a terrifying thought. The silence we've been listening to is not the silence of an empty room. It is the silence of a library where titans are reading, and we have just learned to speak. What happens now? The discovery has been held in the strictest secrecy. The data is being triple and quadruple checked. Other telescopes, both on the ground and in space, are being tasked with observing the region, though none have Webb's ability to pierce the dust with such clarity. The debate rages behind closed doors. When and how do you announce to the world that the fundamental assumptions about our place in the universe are wrong? How do you explain a discovery that offers no comfort, only a deep and profound sense of unease? A discovery that says, there were giants in this land, and we have just found one of their bones. Or worse, we have just stumbled into the bedroom of a sleeping giant. The next steps for the James Webb Telescope are clear. It will stare at a T25 P69 for longer and longer periods, gathering every possible photon. Scientists will search for any change, any variation, however minuscule. The slightest flicker of energy, the smallest shift in the structure's spectral signature, would be the most important discovery in human history. It would mean the structure is not dormant, but active, and for now every scientist involved in this project hopes they find nothing. They hope for the silence to continue, because the alternative is too frightening to contemplate. The discovery of a dead ancient artifact is a matter for historians and philosophers. The discovery of a functioning billion-year-old machine of this scale is a matter for everyone, and it brings with it questions we're in no way prepared to answer. We set out to find the beginning of everything, to see the first light, the genesis of galaxies, to understand our own cosmic story. We built a golden eye, the greatest explorer in human history, and sent it into the dark to bring back answers. But it seems the universe is not just older and larger than we imagined. It is stranger. It may be occupied territory. The rules may have been written long before we arrived. A T25 P69 is a stark reminder that in our quest for knowledge, we may find things we are not ready for, that there are depths in our own galaxy we were not meant to plumb. We have reached into the darkness to find our origins, and we may have found our irrelevance instead. A quiet, geometric, and deeply disturbing pattern, waiting patiently in the dust, a silent testament to powers that beggar the imagination, right here in our own backyard. The great silence of the universe may not be a mystery after all. It may be a warning.
What if the universe, in its unimaginable, soul-crushing silence, finally decided to speak, not with a voice of thunder, not with the flash of a supernova, but with a single, deliberate, impossible change in rhythm? Imagine you are in a library that has been perfectly quiet for millennia, and from the darkest, most distant corner, a single book of its own accord turns a page. That is where our story begins. Not with a bang, but with a whisper that has shaken the very foundations of what we thought we knew about our place in the cosmos. For billions of years, our solar system has been an island of choreographed chaos, a pinprick of familiar light adrift in a shoreless, star-dusted ocean. We are born here, we live here, and we die here, cradled in a gravitational harbor carved out by our sun. Beyond the gossamer edge of the Oort cloud, past the last sentinel of our star's influence, lies the true wilderness, the great dark, interstellar space. It is a realm so profoundly empty that our minds evolved to navigate crowded forests and bustling cities can barely conceive of its scale. The distances are not measured in miles or lifetimes, but in the patient journey of light itself, stretching across voids that have known nothing but the cold of absolute zero since the dawn of time. Here, our entire solar system, with its gas giants and rocky worlds, its history of life and its dreams of the future, shrinks to less than a single grain of sand on an infinite beach. We are profoundly, utterly, and perhaps mercifully alone, or so we have always told ourselves. It is a comforting thought, this isolation. It implies safety, a cosmic privacy that allows us to believe we are the sole authors of our own destiny. But the ocean has currents, and sometimes, very rarely, things wash ashore. For centuries, our telescopes scanned the static darkness between the stars and saw nothing but the predictable waltz of our planetary siblings. Then, in 2017, the wilderness sent us its first confirmed messenger. We called it Oumuamua the Scout. A strange, elongated shard of rock and ice tumbling end over end, a cosmic castaway from a long-dead star system we will never know. It was a fleeting visit, a cryptic postcard from the void. It offered no explanations as it swung past our sun, accelerating with a ghostly push that we struggled to explain before vanishing back into the abyssal dark from which it came. It was an anomaly, a puzzle that sparked 1,000 debates, but it was a transient one. A ghost ship that passed in the night. 2 years later, another traveler arrived. A Comet 2I, Borisov. This one was more familiar, a dirty snowball trailing a tail of gas and dust, behaving more or less as our theories predicted a wandering comet should. It was a spectacular sight, a reassurance that the laws of physics as we understood them still held sway even for visitors from other realms. These encounters, as profound as they were, reinforced our sense of the universe's grand impersonal clockwork. Objects drift, they fall into gravitational wells, they are flung back out. Cause and effect. Predictable, understandable. We catalogued them, we debated their origins, and we filed them away as rare data points in the grand cosmic survey. We saw them as geological artifacts, not as omens. We believed we understood the rules of the game. We were wrong, because now there is a third, and it is following no rules but its own. Designated 3I, Atlas. It was first detected as a faint, unassuming speck of light, another wanderer on a hyperbolic trajectory destined for a brief, fiery hello and a long, cold goodbye. Like the others, it had journeyed for millions, perhaps billions of years, a silent pilgrim crossing the gulf between suns. Our observatories locked onto it, our algorithms began to chart its course, and we prepared to add another specimen to our collection of interstellar curiosities. In the early months of observation, it behaved perfectly. It was a model visitor. As it drew closer to the inner solar system, its brightness increased in a smooth, predictable curve, a result of the sun's warmth beginning to sublimate its icy surface. This predictable brightening, this steady, rhythmic pulse of reflected light, is what astronomers call a light curve. But for our story, let us call it by a different name, its song. Every object in the sky, from a planet to an asteroid, sings a unique song. It is a melody written in photons, a cadence dictated by its size, its shape, its composition, and the speed of its rotation. For 3I, Atlas, the song was at first a simple hypnotic lullaby, a steady repeating rhythm, a celestial metronome ticking off the hours of its journey. We listened to this song for months. We decoded its notes, learning that the object was rotating once every 5-7 hours, its elongated body, catching and reflecting the sun's glare with a precision that was almost mathematical. The trajectory, too, was part of this song, a perfect sweeping arc governed by the pure and unwavering law of gravity. We grew comfortable with this song. It was the sound of the universe we thought we knew, vast, ancient, but ultimately a place of order. A place where, if you listened carefully enough, you could understand the machinery. We pointed our most powerful instruments at it, from the radio dishes nestled in remote deserts to the orbital telescopes floating high above the distortions of our atmosphere. We were dissecting its composition, teasing apart the spectra of its faint gaseous coma, searching for clues about the star system it called home. It was a routine process of extraordinary science, a quiet dialogue with a traveler from an unknown land. We were asking our questions, and the object, through the language of physics, was giving us its steady, unchanging answers. We were charting its past and predicting its future with astonishing confidence. We knew precisely where it was going. We knew how it would behave. The song was familiar. It was known. Then, on a Tuesday, in late October, the song changed. It wasn't a sudden, violent crescendo, not an explosion or a fragmentation event that we might have expected from a volatile comet nearing the sun. It was something far more subtle and infinitely more disturbing. The rhythm faltered. The steady 5.7-hour pulse, the celestial heartbeat we had mapped with such certainty, began to drift. At first, the change was almost imperceptible, a slight syncopation in the data that could have been dismissed as instrumental noise or a minor temporary outgassing event. A pocket of volatile ice bursting on its surface, perhaps giving it a tiny, inconsequential nudge. That was the logical explanation. That was the safe explanation. But the new rhythm didn't stop. It continued to evolve. Over the next 72 hours, the meticulous, predictable spin of 3I, Atlas, decayed, not into a chaotic tumble, but into a new, entirely different and equally stable rotation. It was as if a musician in the middle of a perfectly rehearsed symphony had seamlessly transitioned into a new time signature, a new key, a melody utterly alien to the original score. The object's song had not just been interrupted, it had been rewritten. A collective icy chill ran through the astronomical community. The teams monitoring the data checked their instruments, they ran diagnostics, they rebooted systems, desperately searching for a terrestrial error that could explain the impossible data streaming down from the sky. There was no error. The change was real. What could cause such a thing? An impact. The chances of a collision with another object large enough to so profoundly alter its rotation, yet not shatter it in the monitored emptiness of interplanetary space, are infinitesimally small. A significant outgassing jet, a plume of gas erupting from its surface, could act like a thruster, changing its spin. But such an event would be violent, messy. It would leave a clear chemical signature in its coma, a cloud of debris, and it would almost certainly send the object into an uncontrolled, chaotic tumble. 3I Atlas was not tumbling. Its new rotation was as smooth as deliberate and as stable as the first. It was a new dance, performed with an impossible athletic grace. It had shed its old rhythm and adopted a new one, with a purpose that felt chillingly clean. The mystery deepened. As the spin changed, so too did its trajectory. The deviation was tiny, measured in mere meters per second, but it was undeniable. The object was no longer a passive slave to gravity. It was exhibiting a faint, persistent, non-gravitational acceleration, a push. Oumuamua had done this, a fact that had led some to speculate it was an alien probe propelled by a solar sail. But 3I Atlas was different. The push was not constant. It was tied directly to the new rotational period. It was as if the object's spin and its motion through space were now intrinsically, inexplicably linked. The two new, bizarre behaviors were not independent anomalies. They were two parts of a single coordinated transformation. Physics, as we knew it, had no easy answer. Our models began to break down. The assumptions that had held true for every rock, every planet, and every star we had ever observed seemed to fray at the edges when applied to this silent visitor. We were staring at a ghost in the machine, a phenomenon that looked for all the world like a controlled maneuver. The comfortable, predictable song of the cosmos had been replaced by a signal, a broadcast. Was the first song the simple hypnotic rhythm we first detected a disguise? A form of celestial camouflage, mimicking the natural behavior of a dead piece of rock and ice, designed to lull us into a false sense of security as it approached? Was this new, complex song its true state, revealed only now? That it has drawn close, now that it has our full and undivided attention? The questions came faster than the answers, each one more unsettling than the last. We are no longer just observers of a cosmic curiosity. We have become listeners, huddled around a receiver, trying to decipher a message from an unknown sender. We are confronted with a stark and terrifying possibility that the change was not random but deliberate. That this object is not just a remnant of a distant solar system's formation, but something more, an artifact, a probe, or perhaps something else entirely. For the first time, we are faced with an interstellar visitor that is not just passing by, but appears to be actively changing its state as it moves through our home system. It has altered its fundamental properties in a way we cannot explain, with a precision that defies nature. We have spent our entire existence shouting questions into a silent cosmos, hoping for a reply. Now we are faced with the chilling prospect that something has answered. The song of 3I Atlas has changed, and with it, everything we thought we knew about the universe and our place within it. We must now ask the most important question of all. What is it trying to tell us? Is this a greeting, a key, or is it something far more ominous? Is this new alien rhythm a countdown? Is it the sound of a page turning, or is it the final terrible warning? How do you listen to a universe that is almost entirely silent? For millennia, we have strained our ears, building colossal dishes to catch the faintest whispers from the void, hoping for a pattern, a signal, a voice in the cosmic static. Yet the silence has remained profound, broken only by the dependable hum of physics, the death cries of distant stars, the rhythmic pulse of neutron stars, the background hiss of creation itself. We learned to interpret this ambient noise, the natural symphony of the cosmos, but we never heard a message meant for us. We were, it seemed, alone in the audience. And so we changed our approach. We stopped just listening, and we began to watch. We cast a new kind of net into the darkness, a digital web of automated telescopes, surveying the entire sky night after night after night. These silent, sleepless sentinels do not hunt for signals. They hunt for movement, for the tiniest, most insignificant motes of light that change their position against the celestial backdrop. They are programmed to notice the things that do not belong. In the autumn of 2027, one of these sentinels, a component of the asteroid terrestrial impact last alert system, perched on a volcanic peak in Hawaii, flagged one such anomaly. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a sudden flare or a brilliant flash. It was just a point of light impossibly faint, moving with a purpose that the system's algorithms could not immediately reconcile with the familiar waltz of the solar system. The initial alert would have been sterile, a string of data arriving in an inbox in the middle of the night. A designation coordinates a preliminary magnitude. To the automated mind of the telescope, this was simply another rock, one of thousands it might flag in a given year. For the human astronomer on duty, bleary-eyed and fueled by coffee, it was another potential near-Earth object, to be catalogued, its threat assessed, and most likely dismissed. This is the routine, the necessary methodical grind of planetary defense and astronomical cataloging. You sift through mountains of cosmic gravel in the hope of finding a single interesting pebble. You measure shadows, patiently waiting for something to reveal itself as more than it appears. And for the first few hours, that is all it was, a new entry in a database. Follow-up observations were scheduled, other telescopes in the network alerted. The initial data points were just that, points. They suggested a line, a path, but the line was short its destination, and origin still shrouded in the immense statistical uncertainty of deep space. Was it an unusual asteroid, thrown from the main belt by a gravitational nudge from Jupiter? A long-period comet, making its first fiery return to the inner solar system after a million-year absence? These were the familiar possibilities, the well-rehearsed explanations that fit comfortably within our understanding of our own celestial neighborhood. The object was given its provisional name, a testament to its discoverer, Atlas. A name that at the time felt solid, dependable, a titan holding up a sky of known variables. But as more data flowed in, as observatories from the Chilean Andes to the Canary Islands swiveled their mirrored eyes to this faint smudge of light, the comfortable explanations began to fray at the edges. The line of its trajectory grew longer, and the story it told grew stranger. The first hint of the extraordinary came from its velocity. It was moving too fast. Not just a little too fast the way a comet accelerated by outgassing might be, but fundamentally impossibly fast. The numbers being crunched in supercomputers around the globe refused to resolve into a closed elliptical orbit. An ellipse is a promise of return. It is the shape of belonging, the gravitational signature that binds a moon to its planet, a planet to its star. An object in an elliptical orbit is part of the family. This object, 3I, Atlas, was not drawing an ellipse. Its path was a hyperbola, a perfect, sweeping, open-ended curve. A hyperbola is not a promise, it is a farewell. It is the trajectory of a bullet fired from an unseen rifle, passing through our home for a brief moment before continuing on forever. It was the mathematical proof that this visitor was not one of ours. It had been born under a different star. It was an interstellar traveler, only the third such object ever to be confirmed. The silence of the universe hadn't been broken by a sound, but by the arrival of a silent, uninvited guest. The revelation sent a shockwave through the astronomical community. This was not just a pebble, this was a messenger from another star system, a pristine, unaltered sample of the building blocks that formed planets light years away. Every major telescope on and off the planet was commandeered. The race was on. 3I Atlas was accelerating towards its perihelion, its closest approach to our Sun, and this would be our only chance to study it. For a few precious months, it would be close enough for its secrets to be teased out by our instruments before the Sun's gravity acted as a cosmic slingshot, flinging it back out into the interstellar darkness from which it came never to be seen again. An army of scientists, from seasoned astrophysicists to eager graduate students, mobilized into a global coordinated campaign. They had one mission: to learn everything they could about this ghost. They needed to understand its story, its composition, its history. They needed, in essence, to learn its song. Every celestial body sings. Its song is a complex symphony of data, a composition written in the language of light and gravity. And the song of 3I, Atlas, in the beginning was one of haunting, beautiful, and most importantly, predictable familiarity. The first movement of its song was its trajectory, the melody of its motion. We charted its path with astonishing precision. We knew down to the meter per second how the Sun's gravity was bending its course. We saw how the subtle gravitational nudges of Jupiter and Saturn pulled at it, causing infinitesimal deviations that perfectly matched our models of celestial mechanics. Its path was a masterclass in Newtonian physics, a graceful, lonely arc through the plane of our solar system. There were no surprises here. It moved as a pure ballistic object, should a testament to the universal, unchanging laws of gravity. This predictability was in its own way deeply comforting. It told us that while the object's origin was alien, the rules governing its journey were the same rules we lived by. We could trace its path backward into the void, pointing a trembling finger in the vague direction of the constellation Columba, the dove, from which it had journeyed for perhaps millions of years. And we could project its path forward, a future of endless solitary travel through the cold gulfs between the stars. The melody was clear, its notes unwavering. We understood the rhythm of its cosmic dance. It was a known piece of music, and we had the sheet music right in front of us. The second movement was the harmony of its light, its spectral signature. As it drew closer, its reflected sunlight grew just strong enough for our most powerful spectrographs to perform their magic. They captured its faint, ancient light and fractured it into a rainbow of secrets, a cosmic barcode that revealed its chemical soul. And what we saw was again both alien and reassuringly familiar. The spectrum was dominated by silicates and carbonaceous compounds, the fundamental building blocks of rocky planets like our own. We saw the unmistakable signature of water ice, not in vast quantities, but enough to confirm it was a cometary body, a dirty snowball packed together in the primordial disk of another star. There were subtle differences, of course. The ratios of certain isotopes, particularly of nitrogen, were unlike anything found in our own solar system's comets. It hinted at a different chemical recipe, a different stellar forge where its elements had been created. It carried trace amounts of noble gases like argon and neon trapped within its icy matrix, suggesting it had formed in a region of its home nebula that was far, far colder than the birthplace of our own comets. This was its harmony. It was a song played on an unfamiliar instrument, but in a key that we recognized. The elements were the same. The laws of chemistry were the same. It was a variation on a theme, a powerful confirmation that the stuff of worlds was likely universal. We didn't find any unobtainium, no evidence of exotic technologies or materials that defied physics. We found rock and ice and carbon. We found the dust from which we ourselves were born, simply arranged in a slightly different way. This discovery was profound. It meant that the potential for life for worlds like ours might not be a local fluke but a galactic standard. 3I Atlas was a sample, a proof of concept delivered to our doorstep. Its light told a story of a distant, anonymous star, but a star that likely played by the same rules as our own. The harmony was complex, with a few strange and beautiful chords we had never heard before, but it resolved in a way that made sense. It was another piece of the song that we could understand, that we could transcribe and add to our growing library of cosmic music. It was a reassuring voice from the silence, telling us that we were not so different after all. The final movement of its song was the rhythm of its activity. As 3I Atlas plunged deeper into our solar system, the sun's warmth began to work on its ancient frozen surface. For millennia, it had been in a deep freeze, traveling through the near absolute zero of interstellar space. Now it was being touched by the fire of a star for the first time in its long existence. The ices that had been dormant for eons began to sublimate, turning directly from solid to gas, erupting from its surface in jets and plumes. A faint ethereal atmosphere, a coma, began to form around its nucleus. The solar wind caught this expanding cloud of gas and dust, pushing it back, sculpting it into a delicate, ghostly tail that stretched for hundreds of thousands of kilometers. The sleeping beast was waking up, and once again, its behavior was perfectly, beautifully predictable. The rate at which its brightness increased as it approached the sun matched our cometry models flawlessly. We could predict its rate of water production, the amount of dust it was shedding, the slow, almost imperceptible changes in its rotation as the jets of gas acted like tiny, chaotic thrusters. We watched as pockets of supervolatile ices, like frozen carbon monoxide, flashed into gas when they were first exposed to sunlight, causing small, predictable outbursts of activity. Each flare-up in brightness was a percussive beat in the rhythm of its song, a beat that arrived exactly when our theories said it should. This was the final piece of the puzzle, the confirmation that we truly understood what this object was. It was an interstellar comet, behaving precisely as a comet should when introduced to the heat of a star. It was a wild thing, born in a wild, unknown place, but it had been tamed by the familiar laws of thermodynamics and physics. We had its measure. The global astronomical community, once frantic with the thrill of the unknown, settled into a period of intense but comfortable observation. We had captured its song, the clear melody of its gravitational dance, the familiar harmony of its chemical composition, and the steady, predictable rhythm of its cometary activity. We had the complete symphony. We believed we knew this traveler, this silent messenger. We had characterized it, categorized it, and written the first draft of its biography. It was a story of a simple, natural object on a long, understandable journey. The scientific papers that were published during this period all told the same tale. 3I Atlas was a triumph of observational astronomy and theoretical modeling. It was a validation of our understanding of the universe. We had been visited by something from an entirely different world, and we had successfully translated its language. We had listened to its music, and it was a song we knew how to sing. There was a sense of relief, even a subtle, unspoken disappointment for some who had hoped for something more inexplicable. The universe, it seemed, was orderly. Its mysteries were profound, but they were solvable. The ghost had been unmasked, and underneath was the familiar face of a comet. For months, this understanding held firm. The great observatories of the world continued their vigil, their instruments locked onto the visitor, recording every photon, every subtle change, building a mountain of data that confirmed and reconfirmed our conclusions. The song played on its melody, harmony, and rhythm unchanged. It was the beautiful, reliable, and ultimately finite music of a celestial body on a predictable course. And it was in this moment of comfort, of certainty, that we made our gravest intellectual error. We allowed ourselves to believe that we had heard the entire performance. We assumed that the song we had learned, this perfect and orderly composition, was the only one that 3I Atlas knew how to play. We had become so confident in our predictions, so sure of the story it was telling, that we stopped listening for a change in the music. We were watching a traveler on a known road, and we had already seen the map of its entire journey. But the universe rarely performs the same song twice. It is a place of infinite improvisation, and just when you think you have learned the tune, it shifts into a key you have never heard before. The melody you thought you understood suddenly shatters into dissonance. The comfortable rhythm is broken by a deafening, impossible silence. For a time, the music of 3I Atlas was perfect. It was everything we expected it to be. And then, without any warning, from the deepest, coldest reaches of our solar system, a new note was played. A note that changed everything. And for a time, that perfect clockwork predictability was the only truth we had. The song of 3I, Atlas, a pure and simple melody broadcast across the void, had become a comforting presence in our observatories. It was a known quantity, a visitor whose nature we believed we understood. Its trajectory was a graceful, immaculate arc, governed by the sun's gravity and nothing more. Its reflected light told a consistent story of ancient, inert rock. We thought, taken the measure of this wanderer from another star system. We had catalogued it, named it, and filed it away in our minds as a beautiful but fundamentally simple piece of the cosmic puzzle. The universe, however, rarely offers such perfect simplicity for long. The first discordant note was so faint, so utterly insignificant, that it was immediately discarded. It arrived not as a dramatic cymbal crash, but as the barest whisper of a statistical ghost in the machine. Down in the bone-dry air of the Atacama Desert, where the sky is a fathomless curtain of black silk, the European Southern Observatory's Very Large Telescope had been dutifully charting the object's path. Its 4 colossal mirrors, each a polished titan, over 8 meters across, were tracking 3I Atlas with a precision that could spot a single flame on the surface of the moon. The data streamed to astronomers in Garching, Germany, was meant to refine our understanding of its orbit to the 10th decimal place. But one night, deep within a torrent of spectrographic readings, a single data point fell impossibly out of line. The object's velocity, measured by the subtle red shifting of its reflected sunlight, had flickered. For just a few moments, 3I Atlas had accelerated by a few millimeters per second. It was nothing. A cosmic sneeze. The team in Germany flagged it, of course. Their report was brief and professional, citing the most probable cause, a momentary pocket of atmospheric turbulence over Chile, a well-known gremlin that can momentarily distort the light from distant objects. It could have been a sensor on the telescope itself, a single pixel warming by a millionth of a degree, or even a high-energy cosmic ray striking the detector at the exact wrong moment. These explanations were logical, probable, and deeply comforting. Science is built upon the painstaking process of eliminating noise, of distinguishing the signal from the static. This was textbook static. The data point was corrected, smoothed over by the statistical models, and the pure song of 3I, Atlas, seemed to resume its perfect rhythm. The incident was logged, archived, and forgotten by all but the most meticulous of postdoctoral researchers. It was an errant brushstroke on a masterpiece easily painted over. Yet the universe wasn't finished. 2 weeks later, half a world away, another instrument turned its gaze toward our interstellar guest. The Subaru telescope, perched atop the sacred mountain of Mauna Kea in Hawaii, was collecting photometric data measuring the object's brightness over time. And again, something was wrong. Its light curve, the gentle repeating wave that charted its spin, suddenly flattened for nearly 90 minutes. It was as if the object had momentarily stopped rotating, holding one face perfectly still toward the sun. This was more than just a flicker. A non-rotating interstellar object of this size was a physical absurdity, a violation of the laws of angular momentum. It would be like watching a spinning top freeze mid-air before continuing its dance. The team in Hawaii ran diagnostics. They recalibrated their instruments. They checked their data against observations of nearby stars to ensure their telescope was stable. Everything was perfect. The anomaly was not in their equipment. It was in the object itself. When they cross-referenced their timeline with the team in Chile, a cold thread of unease began to weave its way through their email exchanges. The velocity spike over the Atacama had occurred just before the strange rotational pause observed from the Pacific. Coincidence? Almost certainly. The odds of two separate instrumental errors at two different world-class observatories happening in such proximity were astronomically low. But the odds of a natural object behaving this way were, according to our models, zero. So scientists did what they do best. They sought a mundane explanation. Perhaps 3I, Atlas, was not a single solid body. Could it be a binary object? Two smaller rocks orbiting each other so tightly they appeared as one? Such a configuration could in theory produce complex light curves as one body periodically eclipsed the other. It was a stretch, a desperate grasp for a familiar answer, but it was better than the alternative. The hypothesis was floated, papers were drafted, and for a short while the scientific community breathed a tentative sigh of relief. But 3I, Atlas, had no intention of comforting us. It was as if it sensed our attempts to rationalize its behavior and took offense. The next whisper from the void would not be so easily dismissed. This time the signal came from above the distorting veil of our atmosphere, from the cold, unwavering gaze of a space telescope. An observatory designed to study the high-energy universe detected a brief, impossibly faint burst of microwave energy emanating directly from the object's location. It lasted for less than 1,000th of a second. It wasn't powerful, not by cosmic standards. It was a mere spark against the bonfire of the cosmos. But its characteristics were utterly bizarre. The energy was not spread across a wide band of frequencies like the thermal radiation from a natural event. Instead, it was concentrated into an incredibly narrow sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum. It was more like a single pure note from a tuning fork than the chaotic noise of a stellar flare or an asteroid collision. It was, for all intents and purposes, a coherent signal. The team analyzing the data felt a collective shiver. They spent a month trying to find any natural phenomenon that could replicate it. They modeled everything: a sudden cryovolcanic eruption venting crystallized methane, a plasma discharge from an unexpected magnetic field, the impact of a cloud of dust. Nothing worked. Every natural model produced a messy, broad-spectrum burst of energy. This was clean. This was precise. This was economical. Now the whispers became murmurs, spreading from observatories to university physics departments. The isolated anomalies were no longer isolated. They were data points in a terrifying new pattern. The velocity shifts, the rotational anomalies. The energy bursts. When plotted together, they didn't look like random equipment failures. They looked like a conversation, or perhaps an argument, happening millions of miles away. The song of 3I, Atlas, was losing its tune. The pure, predictable melody was fracturing, becoming discordant and strange. It was as if a master cellist had begun to soar at their instrument, producing shrieks and groans that hinted at a deeper, more troubling composition. The idea of a binary object was quietly abandoned. The gravitational dynamics simply didn't work. No known orbital configuration of two bodies could account for the object's bizarre lurches and stops, nor could it explain the focused energy emissions. We were back to square one, but the board was different now. The simple sketch of a lonely interstellar rock had been wiped clean, and in its place, the outlines of an impossible chimera were beginning to form. You have to understand the profound disturbance this caused. Astrophysics is built on a bedrock of predictability. We can chart the course of a comet centuries from now. We can predict the death of a star 1 billion years in the future. We do this because the laws of physics, as we understand them, are universal and unwavering. Gravity works the same way in the Andromeda Galaxy as it does in your kitchen. But 3I, Atlas, was behaving as if it was subject to a different set of rules. It was accelerating without any visible propulsion, a direct challenge to Newton's laws of motion. It was changing its rotation in ways that seemed to defy the conservation of angular momentum. It was emitting energy with a signature that had no known natural source. Each new piece of data was a fresh assault on the foundations of our knowledge. Scientists who live and breathe logic and order were confronted with what felt like cosmic chaos. The feeling was not one of excitement, not yet. It was a deep, gnawing anxiety, the kind you feel when you hear footsteps in an empty house. The universe was not supposed to behave this way. The community split into factions. The conservatives, the guardians of established theory, argued for patience. They insisted that a natural explanation, however complex, must exist. They proposed ever more elaborate models. Perhaps the object was a bizarre shard of a quark star possessing physics we couldn't comprehend. Or maybe it was an aggregate of loosely bound materials, a cosmic dust bunny being pushed around by the solar wind in unpredictable ways. These theories grew more fantastical with each passing week, each one a desperate attempt to fit a square peg into the round hole of known physics. On the other side were the quiet radicals, the ones who dared to voice the thought that was lurking in the back of everyone's mind. They didn't speak of it in official papers or at press conferences, but in hushed tones over encrypted channels and late-night video calls. They asked a simple, terrifying question. What if the anomalies weren't random? What if the changes to the object's trajectory were not drifts but corrections? What if the energy bursts were not noise but signals? What if the strange pause in its rotation was not a glitch but an observation? Then came the spectrography, and the debate turned sharp. When we analyze the light reflecting off an object, we see more than just its brightness. We see a chemical fingerprint, a series of dark lines called absorption spectra. Each line corresponds to a specific element that has absorbed that particular wavelength of light. The initial spectra for 3I Atlas were unremarkable, showing the expected signatures for silicates, carbon, and traces of water ice, the standard building blocks of asteroids. It was a simple, ancient story written in light. But as the other anomalies mounted, astronomers kept the world's most powerful spectrographs trained on the object, hoping for a clue. What they found only deepened the abyss of their confusion. The spectral lines began to shift. Not the uniform redshift of an object moving away, but an intricate selective change. The lines corresponding to certain heavy metals, titanium, vanadium, tungsten, began to deepen, suggesting these elements were becoming more concentrated on its surface. Simultaneously, the signature for common silicates started to fade. It was as if the very surface of the object was undergoing a form of celestial alchemy. This was impossible. Absolutely fundamentally impossible. The surface of a cold, inert rock does not simply change its elemental composition as it flies through empty space. There is no known natural process, not solar radiation, not sublimation, not micrometeorite bombardment that could produce such a specific and rapid transformation. It would be like watching a granite boulder in your garden slowly turn into a sphere of polished steel. The data was checked, triple-checked, and then checked again by rival teams using different equipment. The result was always the same. The surface of 3I Atlas was actively, inexplicably reconfiguring itself. The beautiful, simple song had now devolved into a cacophony. The steady rhythm of its orbit was broken by stutters and surges. The pure tone of its light curve was now a chaotic series of flickers and fades. The simple harmony of its chemical signature was being rewritten into a composition we could not recognize. It was no longer a passive messenger from a distant star. It was an active participant in its own journey. The object was not just moving through our solar system, it felt like it was waking up within it. The final piece of the puzzle for this chapter of our investigation came from an unexpected source, the subtle warping of space-time itself. Using a technique called gravitational microlensing, astronomers were trying to use 3I Atlas as a moving lens, watching for the moment it passed in front of a distant star. The object's gravity, tiny as it was, should bend the starlight in a predictable way, allowing us to calculate its mass with unprecedented accuracy. The event was calculated months in advance, a moment of cosmic alignment that would last for just a few hours. Telescopes around the world were poised, ready to capture the faint distortion, but when the moment came, the lensing effect was wrong. The starlight bent more than it should have. as if 3I Atlas were significantly more massive than its size and composition suggested. Yet a moment later, as it continued its journey, a different measurement suggested it was less massive. The gravitational field around the object was not stable. It was fluctuating, creating a kind of gravitational turbulence in its wake. This data point broke the last vestiges of resistance. No natural object, no matter how exotic, could alter its own mass or warp the space around it on command. We were now staring into the face of a profound and unsettling truth. We had exhausted every natural explanation. We had pushed our models to their breaking points and beyond. Every law of physics we tried to apply to 3I Atlas failed to explain its behavior. The discrepancies were no longer subtle anomalies to be dismissed as observational errors. They were a consistent accumulating body of evidence pointing to a conclusion that science was not yet ready to accept. The song hadn't just become discordant. It hadn't just gone quiet. It felt as though one musician had left the stage and an entirely new orchestra, playing by an entirely new set of rules, had begun to play. The initial melody, the simple folk song of a wandering rock, was gone forever. In its place was an overture complex, deliberate, and utterly alien. And we had the terrifying realization that for all our listening, we had not yet understood a single note. We were no longer just observers of a curious phenomenon. We were an audience, and the performance had just begun. It began not with a thunderclap, but with a whisper. A single errant pixel on a monitor deep within the Atacama Desert, a deviation so minuscule it was almost certainly a ghost in the machine. For months, the journey of 3I Atlas had been a masterclass in celestial obedience, a perfect, elegant surrender to the immutable laws we thought governed everything. It rode the gravitational currents of the solar system like a vessel on a charted sea, its trajectory a beautiful, predictable arc calculated to the 10th decimal place. We had mapped its future, a long, lonely path that would eventually carry it back into the silent abyss from which it came. We were observers of a majestic yet understandable cosmic ballet. The object's steady, rhythmic song, that ceaseless pulse of low-frequency radio waves, had become the reliable heartbeat of deep space exploration, a cosmic metronome against which we measured our own understanding of the radio universe. It was familiar. It was, we believed, known. But on a Tuesday in late October, the universe decided to remind us of our hubris. The whisper from Chile became a quiet murmur in Hawaii, then a concerned transatlantic call from the team managing the Webb Space Telescope. The data points, once flawlessly aligned with the gossamer thread of its predicted path, were beginning to drift. It was a subtle rebellion at first, a slow, almost imperceptible climb away from the sun's gravitational embrace. Imagine a ball rolling down a perfectly smooth hill, and then impossibly it begins to slow its descent, not by friction, but by some intrinsic unseen force. Then even more impossibly, it starts to roll back uphill. That was 3I Atlas. It was actively fighting the sun's gravity, the most powerful force in our solar system, and it was winning. Every law of orbital mechanics, every equation written by Newton and refined by Einstein screamed that this was a fantasy. An object of its mass, devoid of any visible propulsion, cannot simply decide to change its mind. Initial theories flew thick and fast, a desperate attempt by the world's greatest minds to cage this anomaly within the zoo of known physics. Could it be outgassing? A violent unseen jet of vaporized material acting like a natural rocket engine? Spectrographic analysis from multiple observatories came back with a stark and unanimous answer: nothing. The surface of 3I Atlas was inert, a silent, frozen wasteland. There was no plume, no telltale chemical signature of vaporized ice or rock, not even the faintest spectral ghost of propulsion. The object was pushing against the cosmos with an engine that had no fire, no fuel, no footprint. The hypothesis was discarded. Perhaps it was the subtle cumulative pressure of solar wind, a constant stream of charged particles from the sun, which over vast timescales can act like a gentle but persistent hand, pushing an object ever so slightly. The calculations were run, and then run again through supercomputers in Houston, in Darmstadt, in Tokyo. The answer was a resounding, almost mocking no. The force required to produce the observed deviation, this blatant defiance of its orbital destiny, was thousands of times greater than anything the solar wind could ever hope to exert. It was like trying to stop a freight train with your breath. The numbers didn't just fail to add up. They painted a picture of a completely different reality. Could there be an unseen companion? A dark, massive body, a rogue planet, or a small black hole whose gravitational pull was luring 3I Atlas onto this impossible new course? The sky was scoured. Every deep space survey, every gravitational lensing detector, every instrument capable of piercing the dark was pointed toward that sector of space. They hunted for the gravitational ghost, the hidden puppeteer pulling the strings, but the void remained just that, empty. There was nothing out there massive enough to alter its course in such a manner. The object was not being pulled. The inescapable, terrifying conclusion began to dawn. In control rooms and laboratories across the globe, it was pushing itself. This was the first tremor of the true earthquake, to come the moment the ground beneath astrophysics began to crack. For generations we had looked to the heavens and seen a universe of elegant, if complex, clockwork. We saw nebulae collapse under gravity, stars ignite under pressure, and galaxies spin in a predictable gravitational waltz. The universe was a place of cause and effect of physical law. But 3I, Atlas, was introducing a new, terrifying variable into that grand equation intent. The acceleration wasn't a chaotic tumble. It was a smooth, controlled, and sustained burn. It was the motion of a thing that knew where it was going, a deliberate stride against the current. It had ceased to be a passive traveler and had become a pilot. As humanity grappled with this physical impossibility, as debates raged in forums both public and highly classified, 3I Atlas delivered its second and far more profound shock. It fell silent. The song, that steady, unwavering pulse we had listened to for years, the very signature that had announced its unique presence, simply stopped. For 72 agonizing hours, the radio telescopes of Earth pointed with a newfound desperation at this enigma, received only the cold, empty hiss of background radiation. It was a silence that was louder than any noise, a cosmic void where a heartbeat had once been. The familiar metronome was gone, and in its place, an unnerving, absolute quiet. We found ourselves staring into the dark, listening for a ghost. We had lost our connection to the only thing that made it more than just another rock. In those 3 days of silence, a collective, unspoken fear began to surface. Had we misunderstood everything? Then, on the 4th day, the silence broke. But what returned was not the song we knew. It was not the simple monolithic pulse, the cosmic drumbeat that had been so predictable, so seemingly natural. What flooded from the antennas in Greenbank in Parks in Arecibo was something entirely new. It was a cascade of structured information, a complex layered signal of breathtaking mathematical purity. The old song was a single note held for eternity. This new broadcast was a symphony. It contained modulated frequencies, nested patterns and sequences that echoed the prime numbers and the value of pi. It was structured, intricate, and layered with a density that suggested language. It was the difference between a dripping faucet and a beautifully composed fugue. The signal was no longer a passive natural emission like the regular flash of a pulsar. This was a broadcast. This was manufactured. It was a signal that could only have been designed by an intelligence. The simplistic, repetitive beat had been a calling card, a simple knock on the door to get our attention. Now it seemed the door had been opened and we were being shown what lay inside. The modulation was not random. It carried data. Within its waves and frequencies were packets of information, organized with a precision that made our own deep space communication efforts look like primitive smoke signals. It was elegant, efficient, and utterly terrifyingly alien. The raw mathematics of it were universal, a language that any technological civilization would have to understand, a Rosetta Stone broadcast across the void. This was the moment of transformation, the instant the final warning became real. The acceleration had been a violation of physics, a mystery that challenged our science. But the new signal, this was a violation of our solitude. It was a clear, unambiguous statement. We are not a rock. We are not a comet. We are not a natural phenomenon. We are here, and we are speaking. The unnerving acceleration suddenly made perfect, chilling sense. It wasn't a random deviation. It was a course correction, a deliberate maneuver to achieve a new trajectory. It was positioning itself perhaps for a better line of sight to Earth, perhaps for a gravitational slingshot using Jupiter that our old models hadn't predicted because they couldn't account for its own propulsion. The physical movement and the new broadcast were two parts of the same deliberate act. The object had reoriented itself, cleared its throat, and begun to speak in a language of pure logic. The feeling in the scientific community was not one of triumphant discovery. That initial fleeting rush of "we have found it" was immediately extinguished by a far colder, more primal emotion, a profound and paralyzing dread. We had spent a century broadcasting our own existence into the cosmos, naively shouting our presence into a dark forest, hoping for a friendly reply. Now something from that forest was approaching, and it had just announced, in no uncertain terms, that it was not an animal, but a hunter, or a messenger, or something for which we had no name. The mystery of 3I, Atlas, the scientific curiosity, was over. In its place stood a stark, existential enigma. It was no longer a subject of study, it was an active agent in our destiny. Its song had changed from a lullaby to an alarm, from a heartbeat to a countdown. And we, a species suddenly aware of its own cosmic infancy, were now forced to listen, to try and understand the message before the messenger arrived. What was it trying to tell us? Why had the simple song been replaced by this torrent of complex information? Was this an introduction, a gift of knowledge, or was it something far more ominous? The title we had given our quiet observation, Program the Final Warning, had just transformed from a piece of speculative fiction into the most pressing reality in human history. And so the music changed. The simple hypnotic pulse that had soothed a nervous world for months, a cosmic heartbeat we had learned to trust, was gone. In its place echoed something utterly new, a symphony of terrifying complexity. The confirmation, when it finally cascaded from the Joint Astronomical Task Force, was not a moment of scientific triumph. It was a death sentence for certainty. It was the sound of a lock clicking shut on an era, the moment humanity collectively realized the comforting darkness of the void was not empty but merely silent. And now it was beginning to speak in a language we could not comprehend, but whose tone we felt in our very bones. The tone was not one of peace. The first wave to break across the globe was not panic, but a profound, unnatural quiet. For a handful of hours, the ceaseless chatter of our civilization stuttered. In cities from Tokyo to Sao Paulo, traffic seemed to thin, conversations trailed off into whispers, and millions of faces turned upwards, not to the sky itself, but to the glowing screens that had become our modern oracle. The new song of 3I, Atlas, played on a terrifying loop, an intricate cascading series of frequencies that sounded less like a signal and more like the internal schematic of a vast alien machine coming online. It was a digital contagion spreading through every fiber of our connected world, and with it came a chilling primal dread, a genetic memory of night predators awakened by a rustle in the cosmic dark. Then the silence shattered, and the world began to scream. Stock markets, those fragile barometers of human confidence, didn't just fall, they evaporated, plummeting with a speed that defied every circuit breaker. The ensuing economic collapse was a mere symptom of a deeper sickness, the complete annihilation of the future as we knew it. Why invest in a company plan for retirement, or build a home, When a godlike enigma was screaming towards you at over 100,000 kilometers per hour, currencies became worthless paper overnight. Borders slammed shut not against people, but against the sheer, overwhelming terror. For the first time in history, humanity was united not by hope, but by a shared, suffocating fear of the unknown. In the hallowed halls of science, where reason was supposed to reign supreme, a bitter civil war erupted. The world's scientific community, once a unified front bound by the thrill of discovery, fractured almost overnight into 100 warring tribes, each clinging to its own desperate theory while accusing the others of naivety or warmongering. The consensus was dead. In its place were fierce, ugly battles fought over encrypted channels and hastily arranged global video conferences, the exhausted faces of the world's greatest minds lit by the cold glow of their monitors. One faction, led by the brilliant but increasingly isolated exolinguist Dr. Aris Thorne, coalesced around the Rosetta Stone hypothesis. Thorne and his followers argued that the complexity of the new signal was not a threat, but an invitation, an astonishingly dense data packet, a key to unlock a universe of knowledge. They saw intricate mathematical proofs woven into the frequency shifts, representations of fundamental physical constants that were subtly impossibly different from our own. To them, 3I, Atlas, wasn't a ship or a probe in the way we understood them. It was a library. A messenger carrying a truth so profound, it required this dramatic system-spanning journey to deliver. "You're not listening," Thorne pleaded during one infamous leaked debate, his voice ragged with passion and sleeplessness. "This isn't a war drum they are beating, it's a symphony. It's the grand unified theory of everything, set to music, and you want to meet it with nuclear-tipped spears. To respond with aggression would be like burning the Library of Alexandria because you couldn't read the scrolls. It would be the single greatest act of suicidal ignorance in the history of intelligent life." His camp frantically worked to decode the signal, to find a pattern, a primer, something to prove its benign intent. They advocated for a policy of absolute reverent silence, arguing that any transmission we sent could be misinterpreted as a challenge from a primitive, belligerent species. We had to listen, we had to learn. Our survival, they insisted, depended on our humility. Opposing them with equal ferocity was the Harbinger school of thought championed by the formidable astrophysicist Dr. Lena Petrova, a woman whose entire career had been spent studying the violent, indifferent nature of the cosmos. Petrova and her allies saw the transformation of the signal not as a gift, but as a final, terrifying stage of a reconnaissance mission. The simple pulse, they argued, was a passive sonar ping scanning our world, our technology, our capabilities. It had learned all it needed to know. This new, complex transmission was its report back to something else. Or worse, it was a targeting system locking on, a celestial saber rattling. Humility, Doctor. Thorne speaks of humility while asking us to bare our throats to a potential predator. Petrova countered, her voice a blade of ice. The universe is not a library, it is a jungle, and it is filled with things far older and far hungrier than we are. The change in signal corresponds perfectly with the object's final gravity assist maneuver. It has tasted our sun's gravity, it has measured our system's energies, and now it has altered its state. This is not a conversation. It is a declaration. It is the sound a weapon makes right before it fires. To sit and do nothing but listen is to compose our own epitaph. The Harbinger camp pushed for immediate, decisive action. They demanded the redirection of every space-based asset towards Atlas for a more aggressive scan. They lobbied governments to prepare Project Aegis, a desperate last-ditch global defense plan that would repurpose the world's nuclear arsenals, not as a deterrent against each other, but as a volley of kinetic impactors aimed at the intruder. The sheer terror of their proposed solution was matched only by the terror of the problem itself. The debate raged. Would we rather die by the hand of an alien entity or risk blowing ourselves to pieces in a futile attempt to fight back? A third, smaller faction of scientists, the so-called naturalists, refused to surrender to the idea of artificiality. But their theories grew more fantastical by the day. They proposed that 3I, Atlas, was a naturally occurring pre-solar object composed of exotic matter, a quantum state plasmoid that was reacting to the heliosphere's magnetic fields in a way our physics couldn't predict. They suggested it might be a stable wormhole's mouth, broadcasting the resonant frequencies of another dimension. These theories, once the domain of fringe science fiction, were now being discussed with grim seriousness in the world's top universities. It was a measure of humanity's desperation that the idea of a tear in space-time was somehow more comforting than the alternative. While scientists fought their intellectual war, the world's political leaders were drowning in a sea of paralysis. The United Nations Security Council convened in a permanent, unending emergency session, but the old tools of diplomacy were useless. Sanctions, trade embargoes, sternly worded resolutions, these were human concepts for human problems. How do you negotiate with a comet that has started to sing a new and menacing tune? The chamber, usually a stage for posturing, and power plays became a theater of impotence. The delegates sat in stunned silence, their translators struggling to find words for a crisis that had no precedent. Geopolitical fractures, far from being healed by the common threat, were ripped wide open. Nations with advanced space programs, the United States, China, Russia, the European Space Agency, began to hoard their data, retreating into shells of national secrecy. Each feared the others might gain an advantage, a way to communicate with Atlas alone, or conversely a way to weaponize whatever it was. Trust, the fragile currency of international relations, evaporated completely. Suspicions grew that one nation might try to cut a deal to offer up the rest of humanity in exchange for its own survival. The global nervous system was seizing up every nation, an isolated ganglion firing off panicked, self-interested signals. Behind closed doors, the question of a response became the ultimate prisoner's dilemma. The Thorn camp's plea for silence was terrifying in its passivity. The Petrova camp's call to arms was terrifying in its aggression. What if we fired upon a peaceful messenger? What if we offered a greeting to an invading warship? Doing nothing felt like surrender. Doing anything felt like suicide. The leaders of the world, the men and women entrusted with the fate of billions, were trapped, staring at two buttons. One marked annihilation, and the other possibly also marked annihilation. There was no third option. And yet, in the shadows, humanity began to fight back, not with a unified voice, but with frantic, desperate whispers. Two clandestine, globally funded projects, born from the chaos, spun up in secret facilities buried deep underground and shielded from orbital view. They represented the two warring halves of the human soul, the hopeful scholar and the terrified warrior. Project Echo was our attempt to answer. An unprecedented collaboration of linguists, mathematicians, musicians, and anthropologists was assembled in a remote desert location, tasked with the most important act of translation in history. Their job was to craft a reply to 3I, Atlas. But what do you say on behalf of an entire species? Do you send the sterile beauty of prime numbers, the universal laws of physics? Do you transmit the heartbreaking harmonies of Bach, or the simple visual blueprint of our own DNA? The debates within Project Echo were agonizing. Every message they composed was a terrible risk. Sending our genetic code could be seen as an offering of biological data to be catalogued, or as a menu. Sending images of our cities could be an invitation, or a list of targets. A team of philosophers worked alongside the scientists, grappling with the ethics of speaking for every living thing on Earth, past, present, and future. They were trying to write a letter to God, or to the devil, without knowing which was which. Their deadline was the ever-decreasing distance to 3I, Atlas. Simultaneously, thousands of miles away, Project Aegis was coming to life. In hardened military bunkers, strategists and weapons engineers worked around the clock on the grim mathematics of planetary defense. They game-planned scenarios for intercepting the object, calculating trajectories for a swarm of nuclear-tipped rockets, the combined destructive force of which could crack a continent. It was a plan forged from pure terror. The world's deadliest weapons, designed to annihilate cities in flashes of man-made suns, felt like children's toys, like pebbles thrown against an oncoming tidal wave. The risks were astronomical. A miscalculation in their launch could send dozens of nuclear warheads falling back into Earth's atmosphere. Even a successful hit was a gamble. Would it deflect Atlas or just break it into thousands of smaller, still lethal pieces? Or would it simply do nothing at all, a gnat striking the windshield of a freight train, serving only to announce our hostile intent right before impact? The men and women of Project Aegis worked on their faces, etched with the strain of planning a defense that could very well trigger our own extinction. As these secret projects spun up, the public face of humanity's effort was Project Sisyphus. Every radio telescope on the planet, from the vast plains of Atacama to the green hills of West Virginia, was now part of a single coordinated network. They stared unblinking at the approaching enigma, drinking in petabytes of data every hour. They were no longer just listening to the song. They were dissecting it, analyzing every picowatt fluctuation, every fractional shift in frequency, hunting for a weakness, a clue, a Rosetta Stone of their own. It was a global vigil, a desperate search for a pattern in the static of oblivion. The countdown had begun. It wasn't measured in days or hours on a frantic news broadcast, but in the subtle, inexorable laws of orbital mechanics. With every passing second, 3I, Atlas, drew closer, its gravitational pull a tightening thread on the fabric of our solar system. The window for debate, for planning, for desperation was closing. The voices of reason were being drowned out by the rising chorus of fear. Thorne's plea for humility, Petrova's call for defiance, they were both becoming moot. Time was making the decision for us. For weeks, the data from Project Sisyphus offered nothing new, just a clearer, higher fidelity recording of the same terrifying alien symphony. The world was beginning to resign itself to the maddening uncertainty caught between the two poles of hope and despair. Then, on a Tuesday morning, a junior analyst at the Carl G. Jansky Very Large Array in New Mexico, staring at a spectrogram she had seen 1,000 times, noticed something. It was a subtle anomaly, a ghost in the machine, almost infinitesimally small, buried deep within the main Atlas transmission. It was not a new song. It wasn't a change in the primary broadcast at all. It was something else entirely. A second signal nested inside the first. It was weaker, quieter, and structured in a completely different way. It was simple, repetitive, a pulse. It was the original heartbeat signal, the one we had listened to for months, the one we thought was gone forever. It hadn't vanished. It had been hidden, deliberately masked by the louder, more complex broadcast. The simple, soothing music was still playing. But now we knew with ice-water certainty that it was not a song of peace. It was a countdown timer, and it was accelerating. And so we watched a species of 8 billion souls united for the first time in our history by a singular, paralyzing focus. Every eye, whether human or robotic, was fixed upon that single hurtling point of light. 3I, Atlas, had fallen silent in the acts before its song of prime numbers and quantum states, having given way to a new, more urgent symphony, a rising, impossibly complex cascade of frequencies that defied every model we possessed. It was no longer a message to be decoded. It felt like a countdown. In mission control centers from Pasadena to Baikonur, the air was thick with the suffocating weight of anticipation. Data streams, once a source of exhilarating discovery, had become a torrent of anxieties. The object's trajectory was now locked its path, an unalterable cosmic law. It would not strike the Earth. That particular terror had subsided, replaced by an even more profound and unsettling dread. Its destination was a precise, gravitationally significant, yet empty point in space between our world and Mars. A Lagrange point. No, not quite. It was a location with no obvious significance, chosen with the unnerving precision of a celestial architect. The song, broadcast across the electromagnetic spectrum, was reaching its final excruciating crescendo. Our supercomputers, straining at the very limits of their processing power, could no longer pass the information. The waveforms were folding in on themselves, creating harmonics and resonances that seemed to violate the known principles of information theory. It was as if a billion years of mathematics were being screamed into the void in the span of a few minutes. It was the sound of a universe being written, and we were utterly, terrifyingly illiterate. Every radio telescope on the planet, and in orbit above it, formed a single planetary ear, listening to this final deafening verse. On screens we saw the visual representation of the sound, a maelstrom of light, a fractal storm of infinite complexity. It was beautiful, and it was monstrous. It was the last thing we might ever truly understand. Then, as 3I, Atlas crossed the invisible threshold of its destination precisely on the predicted second the impossible happened. The song, the defining characteristic of this entity for its entire journey through our lives, simply stopped. It did not fade. It did not resolve into a final satisfying chord. It was severed. One moment the solar system was ringing with a symphony of impossible physics. The next there was only the cold, familiar silence of the void. The shock in every control room was a palpable physical thing. A collective gasp followed by a silence so deep it felt louder than the noise that had preceded it. The data streams flatlined. The spectral analyzers showed nothing but the faint hiss of background radiation. Had it exhausted itself? Had the immense tidal forces of the sun, the very star it was using as a gravitational slingshot and an amplifier, finally torn it apart? For a full 97 seconds, the world held its breath, caught between a surge of inexplicable relief and a dreadful, hollow sense of anticlimax. The great mystery had ended not with a bang nor a whimper, but with the flick of a switch. We stared at the silent dot, a mere comet once more, and a profound collective sadness began to descend. The universe had spoken, and we had missed the meaning of its final words. But the universe was not finished with us. Not yet. As scientists began the grim post-mortem attempting to analyze the final fragments of the broadcast, a new signal registered. It wasn't a sound, it was light. A single pure pulse of turquoise luminescence blossomed from the object, expanding outwards at the speed of light. It was not the chaotic flash of an explosion. This was coherent, structured, and deliberate. The light wave washed over our near-Earth satellites, harmlessly passing through them, yet every sensor registered it with startling clarity. It was a wave of pure information, but encoded in photons, not radio waves. On its heels came another, then another, each pulse a slightly different shade, a different frequency, creating a silent, rhythmic strobing in the dark. It was a celestial heartbeat, pulsing with a slow, deliberate cadence in the space between worlds. Then we saw it. The James Webb Space Telescope, its golden eye staring unflinchingly into the unfolding enigma, delivered the image that would forever divide human history into two distinct eras, the time before we knew and the time after. The icy cometary mantle of 3I, Atlas, the mundane rock and frozen gas we had mistaken for its body, began to fracture. Great continent-sized plates of dirty ice and dust cracked along impossibly geometric lines. They did not fly apart in a violent decompression. Instead, they receded. They retracted with the slow, graceful precision of a flower blooming in reverse, peeling away to reveal what lay beneath. And what was beneath? It broke our reality. It was not a rock. It was not a ship. It was a structure, a crystalline, iridescent lattice of material that seemed to drink the sunlight and refract it into 1,000 shimmering rainbows. Its geometry was wrong, a breathtaking violation of Euclidean space. Angles converged where they should have diverged. surfaces curved back upon themselves in physically impossible ways. It was a hyperdimensional object, casting a three-dimensional shadow into our universe, and the sight of it was enough to induce a dizzying vertigo. This was not technology as we understood it. There were no panels, no seams, no engines. It looked more like a single perfectly formed thought given substance. It unfolded piece by piece, expanding from its cometary shell like a piece of cosmic origami. Filaments of solidified light extended outwards, weaving themselves into a vast, intricate web. The central structure, a gyroscope of interlocking spinning rings, began to pulse with an internal golden energy. And as it completed its transformation, our scientists, their minds reeling from the visual shock, finally understood. They understood the song. It had never been a message times for times us, not a warning, not a greeting, not a cry for help. The complex symphony of frequencies, the rising crescendo of mathematical constants and physical laws, it was an instruction set, a sonic blueprint. 3i. Atlas was a self-constructing machine, and the song was its assembly code. The frequencies were not random, they were specific, resonant commands. We watched the archived data with new eyes, and the truth became terrifyingly clear. Certain tones had vibrated specific crystalline structures within its core, causing them to bond at a molecular level. Certain mathematical progressions had triggered quantum tunneling effects, allowing matter to be rearranged without kinetic force. The object had used the sun's fierce solar wind as a power source, a celestial blowtorch to forge its components, and its own broadcast was the command and control system guiding the process. It was sonochemistry on a planetary scale, a form of physics we had only dreamed of in our most speculative theories. It was a chrysalis, and its journey through our solar system was its period of metamorphosis. The final deafening broadcast was the last furious burst of creation, the final commands that locked its true form into place. The silence that followed was not death, it was completion. The work was done. The object had been built. But for what purpose? This impossibly beautiful, terrifyingly alien structure now hung in the void, its intricate machinery spinning silently. The answer came not from any new signal, but from a distortion in the very fabric of space around it. Our orbital gravity detectors, designed to spot the faint ripples of distant black hole mergers, began to scream. A massive gravitational anomaly was blooming from the heart of the artifact. But it wasn't the signature of a black hole which pulls everything in. This was different. It was smooth, stable, symmetrical. Starlight from behind the object began to bend in a way that defied general relativity. It wasn't just being warped around a massive object, it was being funneled, focused. The light from a distant galaxy millions of light years away was being drawn times through times, the center of the spinning rings, emerging not bent, but perfectly intact, yet shifted. Its light was infinitesimally younger than it should have been. The realization dawned in a wave of disbelief and awe across the scientific community. It was a wormhole, a stable, traversable Einstein-Rosen bridge. The artifact wasn't a ship designed to travel times the stars. It was the destination itself. It was a gateway, a door kicked open in our own solar system leading to somewhere else. The final silent pulses of light it had emitted were the calibration sequence locking onto a sister gate in an unknown, impossibly distant location. The song was the key being forged, the unfolding was the lock being built, and the final silent pulse was the sound of that lock turning, opening a pathway through the heart of space-time. We stared at the live feeds, at the impossible circle of darkness at the artifact's center, a hole in our reality that was not empty but full of a view into another sky, another place where the constellations were alien and the light was strange. The terror of a potential impact, the fear that had gripped our world for months, now seemed laughably small, quaintly provincial. We had been worried about our house being hit by a rock when in fact a new infinite road had just been paved directly to our front door. Humanity, for the second time in an hour, was struck silent, but this was a different kind of silence. The stunned shock in mission control had been replaced by a sacred trembling awe. We saw physicists, people who had dedicated their lives to the cold, hard calculus of the universe, openly weeping. Tears streamed down their faces as they looked upon a living, breathing miracle that invalidated and validated their entire existence in a single moment. Across the globe, the revelation rippled outwards. On public squares, crowds that had gathered in fear now stood in spellbound wonder, their faces illuminated by the glow of giant screens showing the impossible thing hanging in our sky. All the divisions, the politics, the petty squabbles that defined our world, they evaporated. We were no longer nations, no longer factions. We were simply the inhabitants of a house that suddenly had a new, unexpected, and infinitely mysterious door. The question that hung in the air was heavier than any object, more powerful than any force. The warning, we finally understood, wasn't about destruction. It was about choice. The song wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. The universe was not empty, and we were not alone. This was no longer a theory or a hope. It was a physical, undeniable fact, spinning silently in the space between our world and Mars. An alien intelligence had not just said hello, it had built a bridge into our home and was now waiting on the other side to see if we were brave enough to cross it. Our perception of our place in the cosmos, our understanding of our own solitude was shattered forever. The final warning had been delivered. And now humanity faced its final, terrifying and magnificent question: what do we do now? And so it is gone. A fleeting whisper in the dark, 3i, Atlas, has rounded the sun and slingshotted back into the interstellar void from whence it came, its trajectory. Now a faint, ghostly line in our archives. The frantic energy that gripped the world, the 24-hour news cycles, the telescopes of every nation swiveling in unison to track the visitor, all that has subsided. What remains in its wake is something far more profound and far more unsettling, a silence that feels heavier, more deliberate than any emptiness we have ever known before. It is the silence of a room after a great pronouncement has been made, the ringing in your ears after a colossal bell has been struck just once. We are left only with the echo of its passage and the ghost of its final catastrophic transmission, that chaotic, terrifying, beautiful change in its song. A signal that continues to ripple through our data streams, a cosmic afterimage burned onto our collective retina. For generations we shouted into the cosmos hoping for a reply. We transmitted our mathematics, our music, our greetings, our very DNA, casting fragile messages in a bottle into an ocean of unfathomable depth. We never truly considered what we would do if the ocean decided to send something back. And we certainly never imagined it would be like this. Not a greeting, not a threat, but a presence so fundamentally alien it has forced us to tear up the very dictionary we were using to define the universe. The visitor is gone, but it has left behind a complete and utter rearrangement of our reality. Nothing is as it was. Our most fundamental certainties, the intellectual scaffolding upon which we built our understanding of everything, have been fractured beyond repair. We are now living in the aftermath, in the age of Atlas, and our world will forever be divided into the time before we knew and the time after. The first casualty of this new era was our definition of life itself. In the hallowed halls of astrobiology, we searched for carbon, for water, for the familiar chemical signatures that betrayed the processes of metabolism and replication. We were looking for cousins, for distant relatives forged in a similar crucible of stellar dust and organic chemistry. 3i. Atlas showed us the breathtaking poverty of that imagination. It was not alive in any sense we would recognize. There was no biology to be found, no cellular machinery, no discernible organic structure that could be called an organism. Yet it was undeniably organized. Its song, the steady, rhythmic pulse of energy we had tracked for months, was a testament to a process. It was a system maintaining a state of impossibly low entropy, a beacon of order in the chaos of space. It demonstrated intent. Its course corrections, its subtle energetic responses to our planetary system were not the random perturbations of a celestial rock. They were the actions of something that could perceive, process, and react. We have been forced to invent new language to even begin to describe it. Is it a crystalline entity? A form of substrate-agnostic intelligence where consciousness is not tethered to wet, messy carbon, but can be encoded in the quantum state of exotic matter? Was its song, its metabolism, its thought process, its very existence broadcast across the spectrum? The final, discordant transmission, that terrifying burst of pure information, was not a death cry. It was something else entirely. A metamorphosis, a data purge, a final frantic report to an unseen superior. The theories are as numerous as the scientists proposing them, each more fantastic than the last, yet none can be dismissed. The uncomfortable truth is that we simply do not have the framework to comprehend what we witnessed. We were like ants observing a smartphone lying on their anthill. We could sense its heat, its vibrations, its strange geometry, but we could never ever grasp the nature of the information it contained or the worldwide network to which it was connected. Our science, our proudest achievement, was revealed to be a local dialect, fluent in describing our own small corner of the universe, but utterly incapable of translating a truly foreign grammar. This intellectual humility has descended into every field of human endeavor. In the gleaming corridors of our physics laboratories, decades of established theory are being re-examined with a new, urgent skepticism. The visitor's energy signature did not conform. The subtle gravitational anomalies it generated as it passed through our system hinted at a manipulation of space-time that our mathematics can barely describe. It was as if it possessed its own portable, localized set of physical laws, a bubble of reality it carried with it through the void. Concepts once relegated to the fringes of science fiction, warp drives, dimensional gates, exotic matter with negative mass, are now being discussed with sober urgency at the world's most prestigious institutions. The standard model of particle physics, that elegant but incomplete tapestry of our known forces and particles, now seems impossibly quaint. Atlas was a living, moving exception to our rules, a single data point that invalidated the entire curve. We now understand that dark matter and dark energy may not just be passive, invisible components of the cosmos. They might be the stage upon which a very different and far more advanced form of existence plays out. But the most profound change has not been in our labs or our lecture halls. It has been in our priorities as a species. The arrival of 3I, Atlas, shattered our planetary disunity with the force of a physical impact. In a single moment, our terrestrial squabbles, our borders, our ideologies were rendered terrifyingly insignificant. For the first time in our history, humanity acted as one. The global scientific collaboration that rose to study the object was unprecedented, a network of shared data and instantaneous communication that transcended politics and national interest. And now, in its absence, that collaboration has not dissolved. It has calcified into something permanent. We have created the Planetary Defense and Intelligence Directorate, an organization with a mandate that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Its purpose is not merely to watch for asteroids, but to listen, to watch, and to prepare. Its budget dwarfs anything that came before it, fueling the construction of vast new radio arrays in the silent valleys of every continent and on the far side of the moon, shielded from our own electronic noise. We are building a planetary nervous system, a web of sensors designed to detect the next visitor long before it reaches our neighborhood. We are funding deep dives into artificial intelligence, not for commerce or for warfare, but to create minds capable of parsing the kind of alien complexity that so overwhelmed us. These new AIs sift through the Atlas data day and night, learning its language, searching for the Rosetta Stone that might unlock the secrets of its song. We are, as a species, holding our breath, our ear pressed firmly to the door of the cosmos. The great existential question has shifted. It is no longer, are we alone, but are they friendly? And are there more of them? This shift has given rise to the single greatest philosophical debate of our time, the Atlas Protocols. What do we do when the next one comes? The visitor's final chaotic transmission has been interpreted in countless ways. Was it a warning, a map, a weapon, a simple shedding of data as meaningless as a snake shedding its skin? One faction argues for absolute silence. To broadcast our presence, they say, is to invite danger. We are the fledgling birds chirping in a jungle filled with unseen predators. We must not draw attention to our nest until we understand the rules of this ecosystem. Another faction argues for the opposite. They believe that silence is complicity, a refusal to join a galactic community that we now know exists. To hide, they contend, is to stagnate. They propose the construction of our own messengers, our own beacons designed to signal our intelligence and our desire to communicate, a grand project to announce our entry onto the cosmic stage. This debate rages in our parliaments, in our universities, and around our dinner tables. It has reshaped our very culture. Artists and musicians struggle to capture the feeling of cosmic insignificance and infinite wonder that Atlas left behind. New religions have been born centered on the visitor as a messenger from a higher power, their gospels written in the binary code of its final song. Philosophers grapple with the humbling realization that human consciousness may not be the apex of creation, but merely one fleeting, fragile note in an ancient galactic symphony. We have been fundamentally, irrevocably changed. The visitor held up a mirror to us, and in its reflection, we did not see a fractured collection of tribes and nations. We saw for the first time a single, unified, and very, very small humanity. And what of you? What of us? How do we go on day to day in a world that has been so completely unmoored from its old certainties? We must now walk our earth with a new awareness, a dual perspective. We must tend to our lives, our families, our planet, while simultaneously understanding that all of it exists within a context so vast and strange, it defies our comprehension. That feeling you have now looking up at the night sky is the new human condition. It is a potent cocktail of awe and terror. The stars no longer look like cold, distant points of light. They look like eyes. The darkness between them is no longer empty. It is simply unlit. We now understand that space is not silent. We were just deaf. This perhaps was the true final warning. It was not an overt threat of invasion or destruction. It was something far more subtle and far more challenging. It was a warning against our own arrogance, a warning against the comfortable illusion that we had figured it all out, a warning that the universe does not conform to our expectations, and that to survive we must be prepared to abandon our most cherished beliefs at a moment's notice. 3I, Atlas, was a demonstration of a reality so far beyond our own that it serves as the ultimate motivation for us to grow, to learn, to unite, and to reach for a higher level of understanding. It has shattered our cosmic isolation, but in doing so, it has given us a reason to become something more than we are. This new reality forces us to re-examine everything, even our relationship with our own world. If intelligence can exist in a form as alien as a sentient shard of interstellar matter, then what does that say about the other forms of complex consciousness we share our planet with? We have long dismissed the songs of whales, intricate chemical communication of a forest's mycelial network, the swarm intelligence of an insect colony as mere instinct. But in the wake of Atlas, we are forced to ask, are these two just different dialects of a universal language of existence? Have we been surrounded by alien intelligences all along, too blinded by our own specific brand of awareness to recognize them? The visitor from the stars has, in a strange and beautiful irony, forced us to finally look at our own home with new eyes, to see it not as a resource to be exploited, but as a chorus of complex systems we have only just begun to appreciate. So we are left here, in the quiet aftermath, beneath a sky that is forever changed. We are left with the data, the memory, and the endless, unanswerable questions. What was 3i? Atlas? Was it a scout, one of countless billions sent to survey the galaxy? Was it an exile, cast out from its own kind? Was it a seed, its final transmission planting some new idea, or even some new form of existence deep within our computer systems, waiting for the right moment to germinate? Or was it something so far beyond our ken that these questions are as meaningless as asking a hurricane its name? Was its journey a deliberate act of communication? Or were we merely insignificant bystanders on the shore, witnessing a leviathan breach the surface for a moment before it descended back into the deep? We do not know. We may never know. But that uncertainty is the greatest gift the visitor could have possibly left us. It is the fuel for a new age of discovery, the catalyst for a future we must now build together. Our childhood as a species is overbrought to an abrupt and spectacular end. We have been served notice that the universe is not only stranger than we imagine, it is stranger than we times imagine. The final warning was not an ending, it was a beginning. It was the universe turning to our small blue world after eons of seeming indifference and whispering, the two words that will now define our destiny: wake up.